Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to modify what we did at the end of the last video. We're going to modify how you move the character. And the reason for this is very often game design is iterative. And that is, you make an iteration, and then you make a better iteration and a better iteration. You come up with a proof of concept, and then you improve on that concept and find a better way to make things work. Since this is a tutorial, I didn't want to introduce too much at once. But now that you've seen how you can capture and monitor and alter rotation and position, now let's find a better way to change position. In a 3D environment, you really don't want to be moving the object by overtly changing the position unless you have to get something totally out of where it is. If you just want to have it move in a certain direction, you really should apply velocity. I'll get into more why that's important, but for now, it needs to be done. So, let's go to the main camera, add physics, rigid body, get rid of gravity. So rigid body allows for the application of physics, hence the checkbox for gravity. We don't want gravity to be used because, as we said, the camera is going to start at a vertical 3 and stay there unless we decide that you can jump or crawl. So now, there's a rigid body on the camera, so that means we can now apply velocity. We can alter velocity. So rather than altering position, we're going to alter velocity, but that means we have to make a few changes. So technically we could use the same names here, but let's not. Let's have this reflect what we're really doing. We're not changing position, we're changing velocity. Again, changing the name doesn't actually change what it does, but like I said, you really want this to be indicative of what it's being used for. Now, I don't know if it's a glitch, but when you set a variable in a script, for some reason it doesn't update in the inspector. So if we go back to the camera, okay, we click on the camera, see how it still says Y3 even though we changed it to 0? So make sure you change it in the inspector if you have to. Okay. So, we're no longer using positions, we're using velocity. And that's another reason why this has to be 0. Because 3 was the position. Well, 0 is the velocity. It's not moving up or down. Next thing, we're not going to be changing the transform. We're changing that new rigid body we added. And we're not changing the position. We're changing velocity. And now we'll just fix these. So far, so good. But here's the thing. Whereas position was changed position and then change it again and change it again, well, we don't want that. We want people to move at a constant velocity. So unless you've created a game where people can run faster and faster, so be it. That's beyond the scope of this. We want to have someone either not moving or moving. We don't want to have a range of speeds. So first we got to change these because these no longer exist. And now we don't want them to be cumulative. Okay? We just want them to be set to a value. So let's use a velocity, say, of 1 even. So you can get rid of the f because it's a positive, it's a whole number. It's not, it's a whole number, not a decimal. Now for the ones that we're minusing it, since we're setting the value, what we have to do is we have to set it to a negative value. So because, again, we're not doing a cum, we're doing a constant. So rather than altering this by 0.1 or negative 0.1, we're simply setting it to 1 or to negative 1. So again, you're changing what you're doing. You're no longer changing position, you're changing velocity. Now, unless there's some force, such as gravity, reducing velocity, otherwise an object in motion stays in motion. So you've applied the velocity, okay? But when you let go of the key, there's nothing setting this back to 0. All right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that you're only moving in one direction at a time. So what we can do is we can make these dependent on each other. So rather than being standalone if statements, we can make them dependent. And you do that just by adding else. Now, what you have to do though is you have to put the whole if statement into the curly brackets. So you got brackets within brackets. So let's just rearrange this now. And you can see why I didn't want to do this in the last video, because I really wanted to get your feet wet, and now you can build on what you did in the last one. All right, so this bracket and this bracket match, so you've successfully incorporated this if statement as a condition of this one not true. So up to this point we said if something is true, do something. Well, what you can then do is say, well, else, in other words, if it's not true, do something else. Well, the else can also include an if. So you're saying if this is not true, so if this is not true, then do something else. It's like, okay, well, is this true? And then what you do is you bring this out one more. You say else z velocity is equal to 0. And this has to be inside here. So make sure everything is in the right place. So this else is part of this if statement, which means this else also has to be within this. So this entire new if statement, including its else, has to be part of this else. So let's read through this. If move north is being clicked, then go ahead and apply a z velocity of 1. Well, if it's not, then let's do something else. Well, we're going to make another check. All right, how about is it being pressed down? Are you going south? If so, then it would be a z velocity of -1. Well, if it's not up or down, then that means it's not being pressed at all. Then z velocity should therefore be set to 0. Because if you're not pressing north or south, you don't want to be moving in the z velocity. And so now we just alter this in a similar way. We do else, put this entire if statement into the else, and now we just have to add one more else. And you don't have to, as you see me moving these curly brackets, you need the curly brackets, but you don't have to put them on separate lines like this. I just think it's easier to read. So I could have run this once and you could have seen the velocity not applying. But again, like I said, if there was nothing resetting this, because before we're changing position, now we're changing momentum, and that makes the difference. So again, you can see why I didn't do this first time, because this is pretty hideous to look at. So again, you're checking to see if a key is being pressed. If so, rotate in that direction and then apply velocity to that direction. Else, check for the opposing direction. Well, if it's not moving up and it's not moving down, then therefore it should be set to 0. And now you do the same thing with the horizontal. If you're moving in the west direction, go ahead, rotate that direction and put the velocity in that direction. Well, if it's not being pressed, check to see if you're going in the opposite direction. Same thing, rotate in that direction, put the velocity in that direction. But if you're not rotating in that direction, then it should be set to 0. that should be all that it takes to work. Oops, sorry, this should be equals 1. Sorry about that. Okay, so ready? I'm just going to tap W, and as soon as I let go, it stopped. It's kind of slow, but that's okay. We don't have a whole lot of room to move with. Then I'm going to go to A. So I rotated towards that screen, I let go, and I stop. I'm going to press S, moving towards that wall. Let go, it stops. Press D, same thing. Back to W. All right. So, again, from a functional point of view, you're saying, well, we accomplished the same thing. But, like I said, there were technological issues if you don't do this. So now we can cap this off by going to the main camera, add component, physics, box collider. Let's move that box collider out in front of it. Box collider does just that. It looks for collisions and it's a box shape. You can choose what the center of the collider is, and you can choose the size of the collider. I've decided to put it out in front of the camera because you want to be able to stop before you're right on top of an object. You don't want the camera zoomed in too closely. Okay? So box colliders do that. They check for collisions. The door, when you create a 3D cube, it already comes with a box collider. So now, let's speed things up a little bit. We'll go back to the script. We'll only change Z because we're just going to move north to see if we can hit that door now. So holding W, we're moving much faster. And we stop. So I'm still holding W. You can hear me hitting it, but now we stopped. We have successfully added collisions to our 3D environment. So let's actually move that box collider out a little bit more forward. So if you see you can see the box here. Okay. Actually, let's rotate it so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so there's the collider box, all right? So watch what happens. I'm going to move it out to 5. See how it pushed forward in front of the camera? So let's do this again. I'm going to hold W, and now you're not so much on top of it. Okay, I think that's going to be it for this video. I'm sorry that this is so messy, but unfortunately when it comes to velocity, you need to be able to adjust for when the key is let go. So there's other ways to do it. What I'll do is I'll make this script available to you in case there's a lot of little things you got to get right. So I'm going to upload this script to Dropbox. You do not need an account with Dropbox. I can make it a public one, and then you can just download the script if you're having issues. You just have to make sure actually this isn't yeah, I don't think I think you should be able to just drag and drop this or copy and paste it into your script and it should work. As long as you've named it, you know, walkabout. Okay, so we've changed manually moving the position to the application of velocity. And now that allows us to have collisions because if you're removing the position, it ignores the collider boxes. It creates all kinds of technological problems with collider boxes. Now you can, the box collider stops velocity. So that should about do it for this video.